After my death, my husband personally performed the autopsy on my body. He took my faintly beating heart and gave it to his childhood sweetheart, Sophia Reed. The 5-month-old baby I was carrying was removed and cremated without hesitation. It was then I realized I was nothing more than a temporary vessel for a heart he had always intended to give Sophia. But 3 months later, on the day of their engagement, I saw him hiding in the dressing room, crying his eyes out over my picture. The cold blade of the scalpel sliced through my pale skin. I hovered above, watching everything unfold. As a ghost, I couldn't feel pain anymore. Yet, when Steven Anderson opened my chest cavity, my soul trembled violently. The tiny, blood-covered baby lay curled up, lifeless. That was the child I had fought so hard to conceive after my miscarriage. Steven had wanted a child so badly. I thought he might at least feel a flicker of grief. But when he saw the baby, he turned his face away, uninterested. Instead, his trembling hands eagerly cut into my chest, extracting my warm, beating heart. His excitement was palpable. His shoulders shook as he worked, so much so that he accidentally knocked over a glass container on the surgical table. The sharp crash echoed through the room, shattering the sterile silence. A nurse assistant rushed in after hearing the sound. "Dr. Anderson, is everything okay?" she asked nervously. I lowered my gaze to the operating table, staring at my own mangled, unrecognizable face. It brought back the memory of the accident, glass shards from the shattered windshield piercing my eye socket, the deformed car crushing half of my skull. I had worked so hard to carry this child, hoping it would bring Steven and me closer. In the end, it cost the baby its life. "Prepare the heart for transport," Steven instructed, his voice steady and emotionless. "Get it into the preservation container and take it to OR3 immediately. Sophia Reed in room 315 is ready for surgery." He removed his blood-stained gloves, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses with his usual detached composure. "I'll perform the surgery myself. Make sure every nurse and assistant is on standby. I won't tolerate even the slightest mistake." He was so in love. Sophia Reed, his childhood sweetheart with congenital heart disease, had been rushed to the hospital 3 days earlier when her heart began to fail. And 5 days ago, I had been in a car accident. The engine had been tampered with. I remembered the thick black smoke pouring from the hood, far too dark to be normal. I knew it was Sophia who had orchestrated it. She hated me more than anyone else in the world. She needed my heart to survive. And she wanted Steven to be hers forever. "What about your wife's body?" the nurse asked hesitantly, glancing at the lifeless baby still cradled in my abdomen. "There are no other family members to claim her remains," she added. "According to protocol, the body can't stay in the morgue for more than a week." Steven adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable as always. "Call Lila Harper," he said. She was her closest friend from the orphanage. I didn't understand. I didn't know why. My lifeless body lay exposed, chest cavity wide open, utterly vulnerable. Steven didn't even think to hold me one last time. I was always afraid of the cold. I was always afraid of pain. Now, even as a disconnected soul, I felt a searing, tearing ache when I looked down at the gaping hole where my heart used to be. The nurse sighed and shook her head, zipping up the body bag to preserve the last shred of dignity I had left. She pushed my body into the cold, dark drawer of the morgue. The darkness I had always feared swallowed me whole. Steven didn't look back. He was already rushing to save Sophia, the love of his life, with the heart he had stolen from me. I wanted to ask him, "In our 3 years of marriage, was there ever a moment when you loved me? If you knew Sophia had been behind the accident that killed me and our baby, would you feel even a flicker of anger? Would you shed even a single tear for me?" But his right hand, the one that once wore a wedding band, no longer bore any mark of commitment. He had taken off his ring within an hour of my death. He couldn't wait to rid himself of the burden I had become. I couldn't find the words. I realized then that even a soul could cry. Transparent tears fell from me, vanishing into the air before they could touch the bloodied operating table. Steven Anderson never loved me. I had known that all along. My husband never loved me. Our 3-year marriage was something I shamelessly begged for. In a way, I have Sophia Reed to thank for that. Her congenital heart disease meant she could never bear children for the Anderson family, giving me the perfect opportunity to swoop in. I still remember the first time I met Steven Anderson. It was at a shopping mall. I had been so busy with work that I skipped meals, and the low blood sugar hit me hard. Just as I was about to collapse at the edge of an escalator, a pair of hands pulled me back in time. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, the faint scent of rubbing alcohol lingering on his sleeves. Even his hair was neatly combed. "I'm a doctor. Let me help you," he said, his deep eyes framed by gold-rimmed glasses. Later, I ran into him again at a late-night diner. He was drinking heavily while picking at a bowl of ramen. The owner looked worried. It was almost closing time, but Steven's table was crowded with empty sake bottles. His neck was flushed from the alcohol, his glasses lying forgotten on the table. His lashes trembled under the dim, flickering light. "I know him," I lied to the owner. "I'll make sure he gets home." In truth, I didn't even know where Steven lived. I ended up dragging his drunken body into a cab and taking him back to my apartment. That night, one thing led to another. When I woke up the next morning, Steven was gone. The sheets were neatly made, as if nothing had happened. Only the marks on my skin served as evidence of what had taken place. Later, I found $5,000 transferred to my bank account with a note. Sorry, consider this compensation. If this feels inappropriate, I'm open to discussing further reparations. I didn't touch the money, nor did I reach out to him. But soon after, I found out I was pregnant. When I told Stephen, his face turned ice cold. Without a word, he furrowed his brow and prepared to take me to the clinic to terminate the pregnancy. But his father, Mr. Anderson, intervened. Their argument erupted in the hospital office. This is the bloodline of the Anderson family. It must be kept, no matter what. Mr. Anderson shouted. If your mother were still alive, she'd want to see you settle down and start a family. I'm getting old, I can't wait until I'm 70 to hold a grandchild. But Sophia has a heart condition, Stephen argued. No matter how much I care about her, she can't give us children. It's better to hold on to this temporary solution. And what about the woman? Stephen retorted, his voice rising. How can I ask an innocent person to bear all of this for our family? You think I don't know you don't love her? Mr. Anderson snapped. But what is a marriage without love compared to the continuation of our family name? Stephen had already told me he didn't love me. But in the end, he gave in to his father's demands. I suppose my willingness to overlook everything also played a part in this hasty, transactional marriage. But the child didn't survive. The second argument I overheard, outside Stephen's study, sealed my fate. He told his father that after I gave birth, he would give me a large sum of money and send me away from the Anderson family. Shaken, I lost my footing on the carpet and fell. That fall killed my first child. Looking back, I wonder if that was the moment I should have left. If I had walked away then, I might still be alive. I might have lost love, but at least I would have kept my life. But I didn't take the hint. Stephen fed me a spoonful of rice porridge after the miscarriage, and all my heartbreak evaporated in that single moment. I was stupid enough to think I could try again, to bear him another child. The surgery went well, Stephen said, turning around. His surgical mask was splattered with blood. On the operating table lay Sophia Reed, her eyes closed, her breathing steady. The heart transplant had taken 5 long hours. In those 5 hours, I'd relived every humiliating moment of my life as if it were a tragic comedy. As the lights in the operating room dimmed, Stephen walked toward his office. But before he could get far, Lila Harper stepped out of the shadows. Without a word, she punched him square in the face. What the hell did you do to Ginger? She shouted. What's with the stitches on her body? Where's the baby she was carrying? The baby? Stephen Anderson wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with his thumb, his expression cold as ever. Medical waste, he said, his lips curving into a faint, mocking smile. Of course, it was sent to the incinerator for disposal. My child, burned to ashes? After the miscarriage, my health had never recovered. I could feel Stephen growing more distant by the day. During that time, Sophia Reed had several health scares. Every time, Stephen would leave in the middle of the night after getting a call, returning hours later, utterly exhausted. He didn't even have the energy to offer me an explanation. I'd met Sophia twice. The first time was at the hospital. She had just survived yet another brush with death, her pale face twisted into a triumphant sneer as she looked at me. Ginger, you're just Stephen's consolation prize, the substitute he settled for because he couldn't have me, she said with a cruel smile. Now that you've lost the child, what else do you have to keep him? The second time was at Mr. Anderson's birthday banquet. The thoughtful gift I had spent weeks picking out was set aside, forgotten. Sophia took the stage and sang a song. It left the old man beaming with joy, and for the first time, I saw Stephen smile. So, he could smile. I'm just not a man who smiles much, Stephen had told me once, in a tone I would never forget. Don't waste your time trying to make me happy. It wasn't that he couldn't smile. He just didn't want to smile for me. That was when I finally understood his heart had never been mine. But I needed another child. If I wanted to have any place in the Anderson family, I had to make myself useful. I endured injections and medication, working to heal my body. In the end, all I achieved was becoming a lifeless corpse alongside that unborn child. Lila Harper stormed forward, grabbing Stephen by the collar. She risked her life to carry that child for you. Lila shouted, her voice shaking with rage. Do you even know how much Ginger suffered? She went through so many treatments that her muscles were wasting away. Stephen shoved her off with ease, his expression indifferent. I didn't know, he said flatly. And I don't care to know. Give Ginger her heart back. Lila snarled, her voice breaking. Give her a whole body to bury. What you've done is illegal.